So my name is James Tyberonn with Eartyh-Keeper, and I am here in Scottsdale, Arizona with three of our keynote speakers and featured guests, Dr. Robert Schoch, John Van Auken, the Executive Director of the Edgar Cayce Foundation and A.R.E, and George Noory from Coast to Coast AM. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you
Great
so
to be
much
here
for
with
being
you.
here at this time. It feels like family.
It does.
I really appreciate and acknowledge the different contributions that all three of you make in different areas of what we might call the consciousness movement, the awakening of the earth. And so many people thought that 2012 was going to be the end all, and it seems, John, you've spoken a lot, and I've spoken a lot about the 2038 based on Edgar Cayce information. Can you share a little bit about that and your new book, 2038?
Edgar Cayce saw the prophecy in the Great Pyramid in Giza. It was public knowledge in the 1800s, and a lot of people published information about it, but it was sort of seen as a little bit on the fringe element, so it did not survive into the 1900s so much. But Edgar Cayce, when he was giving one of his in-depth readings about the future, referenced the prophecy in the Great Pyramid in Giza, and that it flows with the movement through the pyramid right into the king's chamber and up to the apex above the king's chamber, and that the date that measures at that apex is the year 2038, and that this prophecy is concluded then, and the earth begins a new era, and we begin to have a new body type gradually evolve, in which there are 12 chakras, and he goes on in greater detail with all of it. So that's how that all started, was picking up on this prophecy that was discovered a long time ago, but was not really popular during the 1900s. And now it's starting to regain awareness by people, and that it might be an effective date to look at.
Wow. George, did you ever have the opportunity to talk to Carl Sagan, the author of Cosmos?
Of all the people I wanted to interview, Jim, in my broadcast career, he was the one that I did not. He died a little too early in life, and I didn't have that chance.
One of the interesting things that Sagan came up with, and I think this was in the early 80s, late 70s, was that John just mentioned the possibility of a new body type. Carl Sagan came up with the idea that the only viable base that the human body could be based on other than carbon was silicon.
That's right.
It was four valence.
That's right.
Which would tie in with this idea of the human body changing form maybe to some sort of crystalline base, because silicon dioxide is quartz.
Well, they have talked that if there's not a carbon-based life form on other planets, that it could exactly be silicon.
Really?
And I had a difficult time trying to understand that. I mean, are we seeing people who look like glass? Are you going to see their hearts ticking away like a back of a watch?
Yes.
And the physicist said, no, it's not that. But it's just a different form of a life system. So that's very possible.
That's amazing. And in the last talk that we were given, you mentioned that you were aware, Robert, of the work of Dr. J. Alford, who talked about photonic life, bioplasmic life. What do you think about that?
I think that something that we have to be very clear about is what is life and how do we define life.
Yes.
And this gets into the bigger issue of consciousness, and I believe some very good arguments are being made now by top-rated physicists that consciousness may exist within non-carbon-based organisms that we're familiar with, and that consciousness, some put it in terms of a quantum phenomenon. That's basically a quantum phenomenon which you could have, say, in a plasma, electrically charged set of particles.
Yes.
You could potentially have a crystal structure, and I'm thinking of carbon-based life. As we know, it has one time frame, but silicon-based life form may actually be interacting and thinking, if you would, consciousness, but at a different time frame, which may be very hard for us to recognize. Because for them, what's for us, a long period of time may be a moment in time, and vice versa. And if you have, say, plasma-based or other types of consciousness and what should be considered life forms, again, their time frames may be very discordant with our time frame. So it might be incredibly difficult on some levels to even recognize them as living organisms, because we're so based, we're so used to being carbon-based organisms and thinking in our time frame.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating concept. We were talking, I think someone asked George a question a while ago, and Graham Hancock was here last year, and we were talking about the potentials of time travel, of people, of the nature of time,
Yes.
of the torus aspect, where in the physical realm, space is fixed and time flows, and on the other side, time is fixed and space flows.
Exactly.
And we were talking about the potential of people from the future coming back, or that there could be possible areas of intervention. One thing that always struck me as the possibility that I'd like to get each of your ideas on. And the Spanish Armada, the defeat of the Spanish Armada, was an incredible incident. It was Queen Elizabeth in England, and it was Philip in Spain. He had a massive navy, and he carried the seeds of the Spanish Inquisition in the bellies of those boats. And it should have been an absolute defeat. And had Philip had conquered, have taken England and taken Elizabeth out, North America, and I lived in South America 9 years, North America would be North-South America. It would be a bunch of chopped up countries with an aristocracy.
And you would not be speaking English, right?
We would not be speaking English, and we would either be one of the haves or the have-nots with a 95% chance on the have-not. And so, in a real way, if the planet is progressing, despite our faults, the United States has played a major role in the consciousness. Could it be that something remarkable happened in the defeat of the Spanish Armada, where all of these 600 boats were destroyed, and that changed history, that allowed this to happen, that stopped the Spanish Inquisition, which was more than may have appeared to me. The Spanish Inquisition, I think, was darkness. It was evil. It was on that duality aspect of good versus evil. It was a really terrible thing.
Yeah.
And it could. And do you think that there is potential that enlightened beings from the future are our evolved souls that come back and allow certain probable realities to take a certain
I think that there is very good, because this is something I've become very interested in, have been studying, and the evidence for it, so real hard data, and also the theoretical physics behind it, that the future, I don't want to say the future is fixed, we still have free will, so it's very hard, difficult to deal with, but there is definitely things from the future can influence the past, and this has been demonstrated empirically, that it can happen both at macroscopic level and microscopic or subatomic level. There have been some very famous studies now, which the conventional scientists have tried to dismiss. But for instance, something as simple as a person studying for an exam after the exam and statistically doing better if they don't know how they did on the exam. Yeah, so once you fix the future and you know how you did on the exam, it's not going to change. But this is statistically rigorous studies where students were given exams, very simple exams, for instance, memorizing lists of words, that type of thing. Then they study for it after the fact, after they took the exam, but before they know the results. And they would actually statistically do better. So it seems that their study in the future went back into the past. So, and there's theoretical, physics, cutting-edge theoretical physics that suggests that things in the future can affect the past, or as some physicists would say, it's not so much affecting the past, but things in the future are pooling us. So the pool of the future. So it's not that the future is absolutely fixed, but it's not just a total blank slate either, and it can have a reverse effect.
Of course, remember the old saying, you cannot go back into time and affect things. The grandfather paradox.
Yeah.
If you go back into time and kill your grandfather,
Yeah.
what have you done to your existence?
Exactly.
Are you still there, or are you gone? If there's going to be time travel in the future, and I think one day there will be, 100 years, 10,000 years, who knows? Will they come back and try to alter events? Will they go back to the time of Jesus and try to stop him from being put on the cross? I would think that he would say, don't stop this. You don't have any idea what you're doing. Can you go back and get rid of Hitler? Can you go back and change a pitcher in a World Series game? I'm not sure you can do that. I don't think you have that ability to alter those kinds of events.
But on the other hand, what's happening now can be, and I believe there's empirical and theoretical evidence that what's happening now is in part being affected by what certain aspects.
I think the present can affect the future. I'm not sure the future can affect the past.
And that brings up a really interesting idea, because you're probably familiar with the Seth material written by
Yes.
Roberts. Seth says that all there is the now. And that what appears to be our linear past, this is from Seth Speaks, can be changed if our present attitudes change. That, for example, if something happens in which we hurt someone, we embarrass someone, make ourselves look foolish, and the memory of that makes us guilty, makes us feel terrible. He provides a process where you can go in and imagine that it didn't happen that you did the right thing. And he says, this is fascinating, that it actually changes the past, because the past is just one of several probabilities.
Well, this gets into something that you were just talking about, George, and I think an important distinction is what is the past. There are certain things I agree with you. The past is fixed. Once it's fixed, you can't change it. But interesting, and we don't have the proper terminology for it, certain things in the past, what we consider the past, aren't actually fixed.
It's not the past. It may not be the past.
That may not be the past. And we may have assumptions about what the past is, but it hasn't been fixed yet. And getting back to my very simple example, which I've looked at the studies, and I believe they've been replicated several times, with students studying for an exam after the fact. If they knew the results of the exam, it fixed the past, or if anyone knew the results. But as long as they were unfixed, there was a certain level of malleability that was still there. But once you, quote, know the past, then it's fixed, it's not changeable.
There is a windy road in Los Angeles, and I'm leaving Beverly Hills to head for Sherman Oaks, which is where my radio studio is. And as I'm weaving around this curve, I'm thinking to myself, George, you're kind of close to the lane on the left. You're really close. You're not over the line, but you're really close, and you're giving no wiggle room to somebody if they come over. And so I, for a moment, I took a glimpse into the future and saw myself getting hit. And I decided, pull way over. And sure enough, as I'm making these turns, a car comes by, and it really would have been too close.
Exactly. And see, this
it could have
the whole issue of precognition and premonitions, and I mean,
So did I alter the future?
Yeah.
I think I did, Robert. I think I did.
Yeah. So I mean, there is, again, that malleability. And there's some very interesting work at a quantum level. At a quantum level, there is no present, ultimately. There's the past and the future, and there's this deleted, sort of in-between gray area. But what we think of as the present doesn't really exist.
That's fascinating.
It's incredible.
Well, I have one question I want to direct to John, and all of you have read Edgar. and this is an incredible band, incredible body that has influenced so many people, myself. And Cayce spoke about him having achieved a lifetime of mastery as Reincarnational in Egypt, thousands of years ago, literally an ascended master. And in his life as Edgar, he speaks about the lifetime previous to that as a roguish Western man named Bainbridge. It was a gambler. And so here's my question for John and for both of you, George and Robert. If reincarnation exists, as I believe it does, as Cayce explains, are lifetimes linear? Because if Edgar Cayce had his ascended master lifetime in Egypt, and then in the late 1800s was this roguish person in Missouri or wherever it was in the United States an earlier lifetime than the one that was the ascended master? So do lifetimes occur in linear sequence, or do we sit on the other side in which time doesn't exist and just pick this one and that one and this one?
That gets into the whole business of time.
Yeah.
When you say linear, we still are trapped in this, okay, this, and that's past to present to future, but maybe it's not quite so simple.
You know, Kurt Vonnegut's novel,
Right.
Slaughterhouse Five.
Yeah.
The guy
Great work.
Great stuff. He says that these people from another planet come, and when they look at a human, they say a human with baby legs on one end and old man legs on the other end that looks like a centipede, as big as the span of the Rocky Mountains. And that all of that lifetime is occurring at once. It's just one being. So it's a fascinating topic. It's an interesting thought on whether lifetimes can just dip into certain time frames or time holograms, as Seth refers to it.
And it gets back to what we were talking about before. We're in this one time frame where we can recognize life forms in different time frames.
Cayce gave the example of a river, and that life is a river. And when you're down on the timeline of the river, you can only see a little ways into the future and a little ways back. But like the Egyptian concept of the falcon or Horus, the higher mind, if you rise above it, you see the whole of the river and can affect any area on the river. And the reason you can have a very elevated incarnation as Rata and then have a very earthy, roguesque incarnation as Bainbridge is because the soul wants to experience the whole of the potential of the psyche, so that the light can be shined in every corner of its psyche, and it knows its dark side and its light side, has experienced it. And so that's soul development of the higher mind, seeing the whole flow. And even depth psychologists say that the more enlightened you become, the more vulnerable you are to your dark side. And that in approaching your dark side and facing it comes your greatest strength out of it once you see that potential. And the Egyptians used the dung beetle as the example.
Yes, I love that.
Out of the dung of life, you can plant the seed of your higher resurrected self. And that dung's going to happen, and it's best you reach and touch into it and understand those weaknesses. Then you're a much stronger, enlightened person.
Wow. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your contributions, for your being here. I deeply admire all three of you, and I consider this a really wonderful weekend gathering, and just a lot of commonalities. It's been an honor to have you here, Robert, and John, you're my brother as always, and George, a great admirer. Thank you.
Half of my coast-to-coast audience and guests are right here.
Thank you.